I always was taught that pain was fear leaving the body.
You're going to fail. You're not going to make it through. And I just gritted my teeth and said, "Sir, Kennedy Burdick, no, sir, I'm going to make it."
The adrenaline kicks in so hard and so much that you can't help but overpower somebody.
I said, "No, I cannot sit here in a safe location. I got to go and see what I can do to help people."
You go at them head on. You look them right in the eye and you just say, "It's not me today, it's you."
I almost lost it for about a second. And then I got a hold of myself. I said, "Jerk, you're a Ranger. Act like one."
We interviewed 7 local veterans about their time serving our country. These are their stories.
I'm William L. Burdick. I live in Deep River, Connecticut. My rank at the time I left the Army, retired, was Lieutenant Colonel. I had no bad feelings about the military. My dad was a World War II engineer. He was in the Pacific Theater. A lot of my uncles and other relatives were in the military as well. They sent me first to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. That was in September 1966. Landed in Cam Bay, South Vietnam, July 1968, and went from there.
My name is David Rodriguez. I live in Essex, Connecticut. Basic training for all Air Force enlisted people is in San Antonio, Texas at Lackland Air Force Base. You always remember your drill instructors. I don't remember their names, but I remember their faces and their voices. But yes, every flight and the group of people we were assigned to is called a flight, and we had 2 drill instructors for the entire time we were there, and I believe it was about 6 weeks long. And then after that, after basic training, went straight into my specialty school, which was the Security Police Academy, also at the same base. You know, when you first get there, they line you up and get in your face, and it's all about shaping you into the idea, get you out of the civilian mindset and into a regimented, disciplined way of life. And so it's constant early wake-ups. There's no days off. It's 7 days a week. Running downstairs for formations, and then running back upstairs to make your beds and clean up the area, and then running back downstairs for breakfast, and then running back upstairs to get ready for the first part of the day. And there was different activities or different classes every day, and physical training every day. And it kept you pretty busy until about 9 o'clock in the evening, 10 o'clock, and then that was some downtime, and that downtime was used to get ready for the next day.
Get up, get up, get up! Let's all get up with those lights. Come on, your feet hit the floor.
We were normally up, I think, between 5 and 5:30. Rushed to get our clothes on, got out into formation, and then were marched out for physical training, what they call PT. Usually included a run, calisthenics, including push-ups. From that, we came back. We were allowed a very quick breakfast, and then formed up again and either went to a range or to a training facility somewhere for either weapons training, hand-to-hand combat. But that was a typical day in basic training. A lot of marching, a lot of running. The intent being get us as tough as possible, because where most of us were headed was not a very nice place. We're in formation, just standing stiff and at attention, and he walks over and in his typical Southern accent, he looks at me and he looks at the open spot on my left sleeve where the patch was, said, "Oh, Kennedy Burdick, you got a hole in your uniform." He takes his finger, digs into it, rips the patch off. I said, "Kennedy Burdick, you're out of uniform." I said, "Sir, Kennedy Burdick, yes, sir." Drop. 10 push-ups later, get back up. Had to go and change my shirt. But they were trying to teach me attention to detail. And I had a ways to go before I could get to that point. Probably the worst day of that 6 months was early Monday morning. The senior candidates arrived at 4 in the morning to wake us up There was a lot of harassment, a lot of yelling and screaming, shock tactics. It worked, but we didn't waver in our desire to want to continue on.
My name is Keith LaFleur, brought up in Chester, and I was in the U.S. Navy. I went to Pensacola, Florida, which is the home of naval aviation, and went through officer candidate school and initial flight training. And then after that, back in those days, you didn't stay at one location. So you go to, I went to Meridian, Mississippi for basic flight training and basic jets. And then back to Pensacola for carrier qualifications and air-to-air gunnery. Then down to Texas for advanced jets. Out of there, they give you the airplane you're going to fly in the fleet. And mine was the A7 initially. And so I went out to California, to Lemoore, California, which is in the middle of the San Joaquin Valley, and learned how to fly the A7. So all this took about 2.5 years before you're ready to go.
I'm Travis Board. I live in Deep River, Connecticut, and I'm in the Air Force. They immediately bring everyone to kind of a focal point. You know, this is your goal, this is your objective, and this is how you get there, and then everyone works together as a team. I'm sure folks who have gone through training in all of the branches of service would probably say the same thing.
You go out on the ship that you're going to sail with, and you do probably a month of workups. You're working with the ships and getting the ship people trained to work with the air wing people trained to work with the ship. We went out to do that and turned right around the next day, came back into port, and were told we were going to Vietnam 2 months early. Families, I had just got married. Everybody was surprised. There was a big rush to get all your gear on board the ship. Anyways, off we went. Usually you get to stop in Hawaii, but it didn't happen. Boom, right to Vietnam, because there was a big offensive going on by the Viet Cong.
While I was on my check ride, we actually wound up getting grounded because that's when the World Trade Center was hit. I got back a week later. I wound up finishing up, and I got back home to Westover, and then my whole unit was mobilized in the beginning of October 2001. We were mobilized initially it was for 2 years. It wound up being a year, and then I volunteered to stay on orders continuously after that. So I was initially an Air Force reservist. I remained an Air Force reservist, but I stayed on active duty orders all the way through most of 2008. All my training, everything was said and done. My squadron had been mobilized to fly in support of Operation Noble Eagle and Enduring Freedom.
Being in combat over there is obviously way different than you could ever imagine. Getting shot at is not fun, even though it looks adventurous, or maybe in the movies. Every day was pretty high stress, and most of our missions were over North Vietnam, so it was a very highly defended area. And we lost some people, had a bunch of airplanes shot up, but most of it made it through okay.
It was a very different environment from what I trained in, and then it's obviously very different from what you expect. Before I went off to flight school, I went on one mission, basically as an observer, and we went to Germany, and it's real nice. Everything's pristine and taken care of. When a contingency kicks off, you go into very strange locations. I guess it's just a big learning curve. And then eventually you get used to it like anything else.
Site Alpha was, that was when we were there shortly about maybe a week or two after we got to our location in Salopi. A helicopter, CH-53 Sea Stallion, very large helicopter operated by the U.S. Navy, crashed in northern Iraq. They were delivering goods, food supplies to the refugees that were pouring out of Iraq, the Baghdad area, north up into the mountains. And so that's what that chopper was doing. It had some kind of engine problem and just crashed in the side of the mountain. Everybody survived, so it wasn't a very horrific crash into the side of the mountain. It just kind of stalled, fell, and it almost went all the way down. It was a very steep mountain, but there was a huge boulder that stopped it from tilting over. So Site Alpha was that area that we were deployed to secure that resource until other people could come take it out.
Once you're going up north, of course, we didn't have any troops above the DMZ, and it was knocking down bridges and factories and supply depots blown up, fuel storage areas, those kinds of things. I remember the first mission in North Vietnam, the first big, they call them alpha strikes, where you get 25 or 30 airplanes together. Being so nervous that the skipper, the commanding officer, who was an ex-Blue Angel, said, "Don't worry about a thing, just fly wing on me. Just stay with me, and when my bombs come off, release your bombs." And so you fly pretty close in these things. And so we're flying in, and there's surface-to-air missiles coming up, AAA all over the place, MiGs out on the side, and we're going to a place in Hai Phong, another second major city in North Vietnam. And I knew what the target looked like because we had pictures of it. It was a bridge, another bridge. And we roll in. I never saw anything. I never saw the flak, I never saw the AAA, I never saw the MiGs. Because you're just intent. You're flying the CO's wing, and you're nervous, and you just can't believe what's going on. And I look up, and there's a target right in my gun sight. I look at my skipper's plane. His bombs come off, I drop my bombs, and off we go. And the bombs all hit. I wasn't even aiming. I was just flying his wing. But you were so excited that first one that you probably don't realize what's going on.
The C-5 in particular requires a lot of maintenance because it's a big plane. It has a lot of systems. There's a lot of logistics that goes into it. It's a very large plane. It can't get into every airport. It can't park at every location around the world that the military might like to go. So there's a lot of reasons why that plane is not going to come home on time. And so I'd often leave for, let's say, a 7-day trip, and it would turn into 2 weeks or 3 weeks or even longer. None of them would realize, I think, how much pressure you're getting from other places. Whether it be command and control or command post, or the folks who want the cargo. They're trying to find out when it's going to be there. The folks trying to push the airplane, get it out and make way for another aircraft. And you especially find that in hostile locations where there's only so many parking spots. They want you to leave so that another plane can come in. Lots of times I'd be delayed going in someplace because my aircraft takes up several parking spots. So there'd be a lot of pressure. Where are you? What are you doing? What's going on? If you fly a smaller aircraft, from what I've gathered from folks I fly with who have flown smaller transports, there's less pressure regarding what time you're going to be at your location, what problem are you having right now, how can we help? But that's dependent on the mission. I mean, there are missions in all aircraft that are more or less stressful.
Missions that stand out. We were going after a big railroad yard one time up by Hanoi, which was the capital of North Vietnam. And as you were rolling in this railroad yard, there was an air base next to it, and you could see the MiGs rolling down the runway, taking off to come get you. And of course, the fighter guys love that. The fighters carry, we did too, but heat-seeking missiles that track on the enemy's exhaust in a MiG. Well, these were old steam engines that the North Vietnamese had. And he got a tone, which meant the missile saw the heat from the steam engine and shot it through the boiler section and stopped the train. And then we just brought in 30 or 40 airplanes loaded with ordnance, and there were big secondaries, a lot of ordnance aboard the train that they're resupplying. Yeah, everybody was pretty happy about that. There was some celebrating going on. But things get rebuilt quickly over there. It's amazing how industrious the people were, and they'd bring out thousands of people, and they'd fix a road or a railroad track. It seemed like overnight, but pretty quickly.
My name is William T. Hewins. You got that spelled down here somewhere?
Oh yeah. Don't you worry. I have it all locked up.
Deep River.
Wonderful.
I've been living in the same house for 60 years. I went to an agricultural school. I didn't go to high school. That was in Dighton, Mass. From there, I went to the service. I felt like I was going on an adventure. I didn't mind it. Oh, I loved the Navy. Yeah, go places and do things. They have these like telephone poles, and they have all the lines coming down, and you have to learn how to hit these, and the alphabets all up and down. It's really a bag about that long, and all the different flags are in there. And you have to get, within so many seconds, you gotta be able to pull a flag out. And don't lose it. If it goes up to the top, you have to go back and take the beginner's class all over again. But you had to be fast. And being small, I could get right on top of the thing. Some of the other guys had to bend over to get them. I stood right in front. I could clip right in because they have a thing like that. And you clip, and the flag goes up. And the thing with the flags is telling the other ships what to do, where to get in line. Because when we go out sometimes, 12 of us would go out at the same time to convoy these ships up the East Coast. Germans were 4 miles outside of New Jersey and Carolinas. The flags meant what you're going to do. And we could signal when they were going to turn. We were out the flags, and the guys on the other ship had information of what we were trying to tell them with the flags. For nighttime, we had these big lights up on the yardarm, and we had a keyboard, and you had to know the Morse code.
I was in the United States Army, Corps Engineers. Basically, we were a forgotten crew. There were little things that remind you what's going on. The World War II veterans just could not conceive of was that there was no front lines. You went out to go in a bunker, you look first. You might find a tripwire there. We did one time. You know, grenade. You learn to see the signs. We were going to crew out, I remember there's one spot. And it was just very low shrub because the place had been, you know, thoroughly cleaned out. But it looked like there was low shrub. The guy said, gee, there's no one out here. I said, what are you talking about? There's hundreds of people out here collecting firewood. Can't you see them? Because you just had to know, you know, learn to pick up what the motion was.
My name is Jeremiah Lamarck, United States Army, Vietnam, and my rank was Corporal E4. I joined the military on my own. I had 2 other brothers who had been in the Army and were with the 101st Airborne. I wanted to follow in their footsteps, so I joined the Army. The day I left for the military, there was nobody around. I just hitched a ride with a friend of mine, and they dropped me off in New Haven, and I didn't come back home for probably about 4.5 years. Search and destroy missions were mainly for us to go out and try to bring prisoners in, which unless you really ran into a large force, which was kind of hard, because you would go into these little villages and hamlets, and you really didn't know who was who or what was what. And you would separate these people. They'd be hollering, you know, no VC, no VC. And it was really hard to determine. We had interpreters who really weren't sure because they were South Vietnamese, and they weren't really sure of who was who. So we would just round everybody up, and they'd bring in these big trucks if they could get them in there, and we'd just load everybody up and send them out.
You'd see the TV footage. They'd bring the war right into the living room, and it was very troubling. I said, no, I cannot sit here in a safe location. I got to go and see what I can do to help people. So that became my mantra. They accepted my volunteer application, and in July, I flew to Vietnam. And that was a 1-year tour. We made a vow that if we survived, we'd link up at Cam Bay at the end of our tours. The captain didn't survive. A sniper took him out at a landing zone, and he left a wife and 2 kids behind. I was shocked. They shipped me to Pleiku, South Vietnam, in the Central Highlands, a huge divisional fire base. I really didn't want to stay there long. It just looked like you were a sitting duck there, you know, and We weren't fired upon while I was there, thank God. But we were issued our M16 rifles, other special gear we would need. They took us through some indoctrination, some orientation, and then we were shipped out to our units. And my unit was the 2nd 35th Infantry, 4th Division.
Down in mess hall having some coffee, and this terrible stench. So we climbed in our 3-quarter, drove up the top of the hill. Here's some bright individual had decided a nice project to level that hill. Not thinking about the bodies that had been sitting in 120-degree heat under about 6 inches of soil. Communications, man, their survival rate was 1 in 2, working on telephone poles, because they're great fun for snipers. But ours was more, did you hear about so-and-so? No. Their crew disappeared. And it's like, that was more the thing that we were into.
You could feel the heat from that stuff, and it was like a rumble on the ground, and the plane would come in and just roll it across one after another. And sometimes you would think, the way these pilots were coming in, you would think their planes would catch on fire. It just burned everything within it, and if it got on you and you rubbed it, it was even worse. There was no getting it off you, and when you found what it did to human flesh, it was a pretty grotesque sight. It was effective to help us, but what it did to those who were on the receiving end of it was pretty nasty stuff.
One time it was in the afternoon, it was daylight, and a set of mortar rounds came in. They went up between 2 rows of hooches out to the motor pool, out just short of the road behind, and down the road, which kind of scared the guy on duty there. He tried to call, guy about half my size tried to call it in to an 18-inch drain pipe. I had to dig him out. But it turned out, they pulled out the plans, and they had gone from one cross-section up and across and stopped. So they had zeroed their range for Long Bend. And that was evident by later 1122 rocket knocked out the post office at post headquarters. A month or so later, 1122 rocket knocked out our water purification plant. They knew everything about us. One time we were doing a preliminary road survey. The lead man who had the rod was out ahead. And we had set up the headlight. They said, wait, you want to hold that thing still? No, it's gone again. No. He got mad, he couldn't read it because it was going back and forth. He couldn't see, it was waving out there like this. What is he doing? So we all, packed up and went down. And here was this village with all these Vietnamese just staring at him. Not saying anything, just staring at him. And he was very nervous. Turned out that one of those 155s had landed around in their village, infamous friendly fire. And they didn't, short round, and they didn't appreciate that. But for the most part, they were cordial, and you kept your hand in your wallet and go into Saigon and make sure that your equipment caches on the side of your 3-quarter had locks on them. Elsewise, while you're driving down the street, they'd run over and open them up and yank your tools out.
Well, we encountered friendlies, luckily. The Republican Guard, which were bad guys, were the intelligence we had where they were about 13 kilometers down a valley. But again, it was very mountainous, so it's not, you can't see them, but you could hear them shooting. People that we saw were actually good Iraqis, Kurdish Iraqis that were fighting them. And they came down. I remember seeing them in the mountains coming down in formation. You'd see them for a while, and then they disappeared, and you'd see them again. And then they showed up at our camp with their leader, who spoke English. They were good people, and they assured us that they were also protecting us as well. So we were protecting the resource of the aircraft until other resources can come in and lift that aircraft out and get it out, which took about a week. First combat action where shooting was going on was, I remember that very well because it was my first day off in about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, and I was laying down in my cot and I just started hearing rifle shots, distinct rifle shots. And I just remember laying there and opening my eyes, wondering, is this real? And then hearing the crackle of the radios going off, and just, you know, getting up and being a little scared until I left my tent and went and started to help, and then all the training, everything just kind of kicked in, and it was just kind of normal. It was just like an exercise, except live.
The most exciting thing that happened to me was when we left Bermuda. We got notice, everybody's got to get out of the harbor, clear it. Even the ones that, they have these huge, huge ships in there, cooks and bakers and stuff. As ships come in, they could service them, you know. And even they had to go out. The ship usually only went out in an emergency. And we went out, and I'll tell you something, I never thought we'd get out of it. Boy, oh boy, that tornado was something else. Well, it wasn't a tornado, they call them hurricanes. And then you could look all around you, and you could see the ships, they go like that, and then whoosh. We had a game going the day after the hurricane. It was still rough out there. If you wanted to be a real seaman, you had to run up and put your hand on the Union Jack, right up in the bow. You'd run, the water would start coming right up, and then the ship would lift way up, you know. And then when it came down again, the water would start coming up over your ankles and the knees, and then whoop, back up again. It was a rough ride, let me tell you. That thing was over 360 feet long, and it was diving. Nobody ever told me what really happened aboard that ship, but something bad happened because we had just had a drill. You know, we practice all the time, every day you practice. And I was walking away from my station, and everything went white. I woke up, they had me on a mess hall table, laid out. It's something that, well, hospital sent a ship, sent the captain's jig around. That's like a small yacht. Sick call, and they took me over to the aircraft carrier because they had a doctor, a real doctor on board. I was in the hospital with a guy that got hurt in the same accident, and he said that they were loading a gun, and the officer told the guy to open the breech, and the shell hadn't gone off yet. It went off then. That's what they told me. But I didn't see any of that because I just, everybody says you go blackout. I go way out.
I had at least 10 guys lying wounded on the jungle floor, trying to get them evacuated. I was adjusting 500-pound bombs from Air Force aircraft onto the enemy position. To my right, I had the first sergeant and 2 other guys holding down a fellow who had just totally lost it. He started screaming. He said, "I gotta get out of here. Let me go. I want to go home." And all I could do was turn to them, very angry and afraid, and say, "Hold him down." I knew if he got up, he'd be shot. We got the guys out. What hurt probably the most, besides seeing those guys lying on the jungle floor, was my 3rd platoon leader was lying in front of me. They had brought him back from being wounded. And his back and lower legs were pot-marked with shrapnel from a B-40 rocket. the enemy had used B-40 rocket launchers real well against us. And it was sort of like, if you can imagine a shape charge, it doesn't explode out so much as it does explode in. And there's usually shrapnel, particularly if it hits trees. But he's lying there and I'm holding his hand and he's crying. I said, Bill, they just, you know, they're not afraid of us. They just keep coming. And it was all I could do not to cry. And I looked at my second platoon leader, who was also wounded. And I lost all my lieutenants that day. I only had 2, but I lost them both. Fortunately, they didn't die.
There was a lot of tense moments, very tense moments. Some of them turned ugly, some of them didn't. There was an incident where there was a fellow from Wisconsin by the name of Faulkner, and there was another fellow by the name of Jimmy Storrs, who were unfortunately no longer with us. Jimmy Storrs and I were coming out. We were sent like on a flanking motion to come around the back of the village, and when we come in, they were rounding everybody up into the center of the village. And this kid Faulkner had his back turned, and this individual come out of this hut, or whatever you want to call it, and had a big, huge axe. I thought it was the biggest axe I've ever seen in my life, and was about ready to sink it in his back. And we had to take him out. We were against the North Vietnamese, and we were against the Viet Cong. The North Vietnamese had the North Vietnamese regulars, which were good soldiers. They were trained veteran soldiers. And they knew the jungle. They knew the jungle. We didn't. We didn't. We just, sometimes you felt like you were hoping to draw the lucky card and get in there and get out. But in the Battle of Dak To, we were up against such a force that we were just getting pounded. Mortars, rocket-propelled grenades, small arms fire that just never stopped. Just never ever stopped. It went day and night, day and night. We were more busy pulling the wounded back and the dead to try to get them back to account for everybody, I think, in my sector than we did more fighting. So finally we were brought up to the center and brought into the center and then put in the real thick mix.
And I'm holding on to the radio handset. And I almost lost it for about a second. And then I got a hold of myself. I said, "You jerk, you're a Ranger, act like one." And got back into it. It was very fearful. You never knew if you were going to make it through that day, and through the night for that matter. And I demanded that they not call me sir in combat. That in and of itself was dangerous. So the North Vietnamese knew who I was and what my role was. So every chance they had, they were looking for a way to knock me off. The Central Highlands, and in particular the dense mountainous terrain, just added to the complexity, to the fear. If you weren't careful, you could slip and fall and break something. And we were carrying 70-pound rucksacks. You know, you get used to it, but it was difficult. And I was very proud of my guys. They told me that I'm the reason they survived. I was shocked to hear that. Whether or not it's totally true, I don't know, but it doesn't matter. It's what they think and what they believe, and they're that special. I was willing to give everything to protect them. Almost did a few times, but they knew I was the real deal, and that I was going to try and help them stay alive so that they could fight another day when necessary.
They had a name, it's called like the bull's horns. They were trying to come in and come around the back, and it was impossible to do it. Air support, napalm was dropped, artillery shells, just constant pounding, constant pounding. It had not been for the air support and the napalm and the artillery units, it would have been a lot worse than what it was. And it was actually one of the worst times to be in the thicket, to be in that canopy. Some of the canopies, they were 3-4 thick. You couldn't see the sun. And if you slept with your boots off at night when you were back in at base camp, you shook your boots out every morning to make sure there was no scorpions in them. It's pretty scary. It's pretty scary. But once again, no, you just remember everything you have to do and you do it. It's hard to explain. You know, I always was taught that pain was fear leaving the body. And if I was inflicted with a wound, which I was a couple times, superficial wounds, knife wounds or something, but your adrenaline kicks in so hard and so much that you can't help but overpower somebody if you know what you're doing. You go at them head on. You look them right in the eye and you just say, "It's not me today, it's you," and you do what you have to do. And during something like that, there's a lot of screaming and a lot of yelling because you're taught in basic training. It's a psychological thing. When you charge, be it a bayonet charge or just a rifle charge, there's a lot of screaming and a lot of hollering just to try to throw somebody off. And that's what you end up doing. You don't hear yourself screaming, you don't hear yourself hollering. And quite often, you don't even hear the shots. You don't even hear the shots being fired at you. You're just, for a while, you're scared. You're a young kid, you're scared, and that's it.
So he sent me back to the hospital, and I was there about 3 weeks. And they called me in and they said, we don't consider you to be able to continue to serve. And that was the end of being in the Navy. You know, it's kind of, gee, I'll get to go back home, but I had a lot of friends in the service. Everybody's friendly aboard ship. They're all living right there. They did give me an offer. I could be in the medical. I could be in the medics, but I didn't want to do that. So I just went home, and my first job when I got home was working in a dairy. You know, where they pasteurize the milk and all that stuff. That's the Atlantic code right there, the color, where your thumb is. The color code, white, red, blue, and all that, that you gave your service. That's just to say that you served and you got a honorable discharge. You know, I actually think that it should be compulsory for guys to serve. Maybe for beginners, how about two years? My son-in-law started out as a E7. He's now a colonel. He's taken care of for the rest of his life.
When I went in, initially, I was 17 years old. Really wasn't sure what I was doing. But it was obviously, I think, the best decision I've ever made in hindsight. But no regrets whatsoever about doing what I've done, you know, in the Air Force. And the training and experiences that I've gained have put me in the position to be able to get some pretty lucrative positions in the government now.
And we did the northern route back, Japan, Alaska. Got out of Japan, last week we wrapped blankets around, got out there. Landed in Oakland. This is 19 hours later, you get out. That was it. You got a plane, we got this plane ride for you. Ron got on the plane, and in 24 hours I was home.
No fanfare, no.
Absolutely nothing. That was a shock. No, that's how fast it happened. And I can see some people, they get close to home and they just, like the ones that went into the hills of Arizona or Olympic Forest, or just, they looked around and they couldn't associate with any of it.
There was no reception, other than our wives and family, who were happy to see us. But as far as the general populace, there was nothing. Going out on the carrier, when we went under the Golden Gate Bridge, people were throwing paint down on us. It wasn't a popular war. Yeah, it upsets you. It does. But we were young and confident, and I think most of us kind of shrugged it off as maybe not being the whole populace, it being a small group. I guess you had to look at it that way. But then coming home, even after you were going around town, or maybe I came back here to Chester, there really wasn't anything. There was no, thanks for your service or any of that kind of stuff that you see now. Thank God all that's changed. The service is like a big family. You maintain those relationships. You train the people who work for you, or you're trained by people who you look up to. When you're in charge of people in the service, you're not only helping the sailor, but their families too. So if their families have problems, you're in there, you're helping. It gives you a feeling of responsibility, of pride, of helping other people. Certainly made me a better person, I think.
Losing my good friends, my close friends, two of them have taken their lives here, stateside, since we've been home. I have a tattoo on my right arm that's got different graphics on it, and on the bottom it says 6, 4, and 2, and there was 6 of us that hung around together, and then there was 4 of us. Now there's only 2 of us. And the second guy, unfortunately, kind of had a very severe breakdown, if you will, and is in an institution, and he's not coming out. But I don't regret anything I do. And I just would like to say to the young people out there today, I hope that you maintain your level of respect for the veterans, the GIs, the sailors, the Marines, the Coast Guard. Because of everything that you're doing today, and all the expressions that you have today, and all the opinions you have today, and the fact that you could get up and come to this school today is due to a veteran who defended our flag, and who today is defending your right to say and do what you want to say and do. And you couldn't do that anywhere else except right here in the United States of America, and it's due to the veterans.
For anyone that's looking for that kind of opportunity, I applaud them. It's a wonderful way to spend a little bit of time serving your country and doing something good for people. I'm told by my men that I did a lot of good things. I'm not sure, but they say I did. It was a very difficult period of time, especially for the men that I led in combat. As these guys were just trying to survive day by day. This might sound a little unpatriotic, but yes, they were proud of being Americans, but they fought for each other. And I fought for them. Yeah, we were fighting for our country too, but more importantly, we fought for each other to help each other survive and hopefully go home to their families. And I think it's probably that way in just about any war that we might face. And God forbid that we would have any more wars, although we're still obviously in the middle of what you could call a war now, a war on terrorism. But I have no regrets about the decisions that I made, and the friends that I made are lifetime friends. I get to see them every year. And Joe Soga, the guy that took that picture I showed you, he and I will meet our brigade chaplain November the 7th, and I am so looking forward to that. And we're bringing our wives with us as well. Hopefully there won't be too many war stories.